So, today we're diving into this really fascinating method called appreciative interviewing. Now, you might be thinking it's all about just being positive, but it goes way, way deeper than that. It's built on this incredible idea that the questions we ask don't just find information, they can actually help co create a whole new reality.
Okay, but let's just get right to the elephant in the room, right? The big challenge at the heart of this whole thing. If you only ask about what's going well, about people's strengths, their best moments, are you really getting the full picture? Or are you just ignoring all the other stuff, the decay, the struggle, the messy parts that actually make an ecosystem or a person whole? Well, to even begin to answer that, you've got to understand something crucial. Appreciative interviewing isn't just another technique you pull out of a toolbox. It's a whole different worldview. It's what's called an epistemology.
Epistemology? Yeah, it's a big word, but all it really means is how we know what we know. And this is where things get really interesting. This approach says reality isn't some fixed thing just waiting for us to discover it. Nope, it's something we are actively building together, right in the middle of a conversation. Okay, so here's the absolute key takeaway from that. When you ask someone a question, you're not just slapping a label on some memory that's already there. You are doing something. It's an action. You're intervening, and you're changing the very system you're trying to understand. And that right there is a total game changer.
You know, to really get a handle on this, there's a great metaphor. Think of the traditional researcher as kind of a paleontologist, carefully digging up facts from the past. But the appreciative interviewer, they're much more like a gardener.
Yeah, check this out. This really lays it all out. On one side, you've got the paleontologist. They're unearthing a fixed past, treating a memory like it's a fossil. But the gardener is cultivating a potential future. For them, a question isn't a shovel to extract something. It's a seed. The goal isn't just to get information. It's to work together to create a brand new story.
And this quote, man, this just nails it. See, the story that comes out in one of these interviews isn't some dusty old relic you just dug up. It's a living thing, a new sprout in that person's inner world. That potential, it was always there, but it's the interview itself, the relationship, the safe space. That's what gives it the right conditions to grow. Okay, so if that's the first piece of the puzzle, let's see how it builds on itself. Because if the first part is about planting a seed from a past success, the next part is all about dreaming of the future. And we've got another really powerful metaphor for this one. I mean, just think about that for a second. Is asking someone to imagine their perfect future kind of like asking an acorn to dream about being a mighty oak tree? Now, a traditional researcher might hear that and think, come on, that's just daydreaming, it's fantasy. But from this worldview, that dream is an act of creation. The very image of the future oak tree actually changes how that little acorn grows, right now, in the present.
So you're probably wondering, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, it kind of boils down to a three-step dance. First, you get someone to remember a peak experience, a time they were at their absolute best. That's planting the seed. Then, you ask them to imagine their ideal future. That's dreaming of the oak tree. And finally, you ask them to paint that future. Not just in words, but with feelings, with images, with the whole sensory experience.
All right, so this all sounds pretty amazing, right? But this is where we have to hit the brakes and ask that really tough question we started with. If all we talk about are peak moments and ideal futures, what happens to the pain? What do we do with the trauma, the failure, the grief? And this is the core paradox of the whole thing. If the questions we ask really do create reality, then what reality are we creating when we refuse to even ask about the painful parts? It's a really deep and serious challenge. And listen, the source material doesn't shy away from this. It lays out the critique in the most powerful way possible. For someone who has been through something horrific, like an abuse survivor, focusing only on the positive can feel like you're completely dismissing their reality. It can literally silence their pain, and that, in and of itself, can be a brand new trauma. There's actually a name for this kind of danger, and it comes straight from Greek mythology, the Procrustean bed. Procrustes was this innkeeper who had a bed, and to make his guests fit, he'd either stretch them out or chop off their legs. The danger here is that a purely positive approach becomes that bed. It forces a person's experience to fit a happy narrative by cutting off all the painful parts that don't. So, where do we go from here? How do you solve a puzzle like that? Well, the answer isn't to throw the whole thing out. It's about shifting our understanding of appreciation itself, moving from simple positivity to something much deeper, something more whole.
And here's the thing. Any system, a person, a team, a community that ignores its own shadow, its own pain and failures, is not a whole system. If you only focus on the light, you're not getting the whole picture. You're just looking at a distorted, incomplete version of things.
So real, deep appreciation, it's not about pretending the bad stuff doesn't exist. It's about seeing the whole pattern that connects the joy and the pain. It's about recognizing the incredible resilience that's born from hardship. It's about seeing the strength that gets forged in conflict. It means honoring the entire story, shadow and all.
And this leads us to a really beautiful metaphor that kind of ties it all together. The words themselves, the stories people tell, they're like caterpillars. But the real magic happens, the transformation into a butterfly, when those words are warmed by the sun. And that sun is the safe, trusting, appreciative relationship with the interviewer. That's the secret sauce.
Which brings us to what might be the single most important lesson from all of this. It's an old saying. The map is not the territory. And in this case, the tool, the set of interview questions, is not the same thing as the practice. Let me put it another way, with one final comparison. Think of your interview guide, your list of questions. That's just the scaffolding. It's the temporary structure you put up, but it's not the point. The point is the building itself, and that building is the relationship, the real living connection you create with another person. And that is the biggest pitfall of all. The danger is when we get so focused on the questions, on the technique, that we mistake the scaffolding for the building. It's when we just go through the motions without that deep relational worldview, without creating that warm, appreciative sun for a story to transform in. So at the end of the day, it leaves us with this question. Is the real goal here just to learn a new tool, to add another technique to our list? Or is it about learning how to enter into a dance with another human being? A dance of co-creation, of mutual respect and shared evolution? That is the real power of the questions we ask.